How have we got to this point as a society? It's like serious question here. You know, to those who grew up prior to the manifestation of the new and improved progressive Scottish education system, aka the curriculum for excellence, to those who grew up prior to that, you will recall days of old where when men in particular were acting a bit queer or simpy or cringe, you would quite often just call a spade and call them gay. Okay. Obviously, in the modern era where we can't do that anymore, you have to choose your words wisely. And I, trying to pluck my brains as to what word to use vocabulary wise. I'm sorry, it's so cringe. It's just so cringe. I don't know. I really don't know it. This right here, I genuinely thought was a Photoshop until I seen the video. And then I seen the video, and then I thought to myself, kill me right now. Papa Putin, you base Slavic man, nuke me, daddy, please. Put me out my fucking misery, because this is misery indeed. This is Scottish nationalism, apparently, yeah? This unelected, specky, bald... refrain from Sandra. It's gay. It's just really, 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 really effeminate shit. But this is what is classified as Scottish nationalism according to the opponents of this dickhead. This is where we are at now as a society. For those who actually bother their arse to follow politics in any capacity. There's actually people out there who non-ironically vote for this ballbag and his ilk. We'll just keep voting for them, and then when we get a referendum and we win it, then we'll just tell them to do one. But in the meantime, you're embarrassing yourself if you actually follow this shit. That said, this actually sort of ties into something that has been going on for the last few weeks. I mean, the photo. I'm sorry, it's just so cringe. But in Scotland, outside hotels, Falkirk in particular has been getting a lot of headlines. Aberdeen was another one. Edinburgh a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. Glasgow wasn't that far behind, or we're going past tense, obviously. And obviously it's met with the proverbial from the likes of Stand Up to Racism, as well as Hope Not Hate, as well as your dickheads on Twitter and the mainstream media. And probably if the Parliament was open for business, you'd hear a lot of rhetoric coming out of these people as well in relation to the far right this, the far right that, bigots, Nazis, etc. The proverbial nonsense we're all accustomed to. But Susan Aitken... Right, this all ties in. This fucking waffle, by the way, I'm sorry. Get a grip of yourself. Join me, and together let's make Scotland a more welcoming and inclusive place. What a great guy you are, Jonathan. What a great guy you are.
Compassion and empathy have long been Scotland's values when it comes to welcoming asylum seekers and refugees to our country. And nowhere has that been more evident than in the city of Glasgow. For more than 20 years, Glaswegian communities have hosted now many, many thousands of asylum seekers and refugees, Congolese, Tamil, Kurdish, Eritrean, Afghan, Iranian, Syrian, Ukrainian, and many, many more. And they are Glaswegians now. Our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues, and I'm very proud indeed that two of my fellow Glasgow SNP councillors come from our refugee communities.
City Council has a long tradition of accommodating people seeking asylum from some of the most perilous corners of the world. But has the city reached saturation points? The City Council believes it might have, and it's asked the UK government to temporarily stop sending asylum seekers under the UK-wide dispersal scheme. Not see this as such, if at all, an issue here in Scotland, that it's different kinds of pressure points in different parts of the country.
Yes, it is different kinds of pressure points. What's clear though is that in Scotland we are not immune from bad actors, from people on the far right who would exploit, who would misinform, who would straight up lie about the situation in Scotland in order to foment that kind of unrest and anger towards asylum seekers and indeed refugees for that matter.
So I just played a few clips, one after the other there, to sort of highlight the issue that's been ongoing for some time in Glasgow, right? Before I get to Falkirk, I think we should really focus on Glasgow, just temporarily, given the fact, of course, that Glasgow accommodates the most asylum seekers in the UK. These are the latest figures, believe it or not, right? Where it says just down here that Glasgow is accommodating more asylum seekers than any other local authority in the UK, according to newly published Home Office data. As of the 30th of June of this year, nearly 4,000 asylum seekers were being housed by Glasgow City Council, almost 40% more than the next highest local authority, which is Birmingham. The figures include individuals and their dependents currently receiving government subsidies, whether in initial accommodation, such as hotels or hostels, or in dispersal accommodation, which can include shared houses or flats, right? Okay, so when Susan Aitken, the boot, the beaut, if you will, who seems to be the head of the SNP's little entourage in the Glasgow Council, talks to no end about the far rights, you know, exploiting issues and misinforming the public, you know, homing in on issues that are blatantly there, irrespective of whether or not you wish to admit, depending on what day it is, if asylum seekers and or refugees here, quote unquote, have anything to do with it or not, right? Depending on which mood they're in, sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't. But to insinuate that the far right, this non-existent fucking boogeyman, the far right are exploiting and misinforming the public, homing in on issues, and they're just doing so due to their ideology, it's quite preposterous, quite frankly, given the fact that just a couple of years prior, Glasgow declared a housing emergency. This was from their own council's website, may I add. At the City Administration Committee on Thursday, the 30th of November 2023, councillors agreed the unprecedented pressures facing the council in relation to homelessness has forced its hand to declare the city is now experiencing a housing emergency. Councillor Alan Casey, City Convener for Workforce, Homelessness and Addiction, on the impact of the Home Office's decision to streamline the asylum process. Okay, so they at times will concede that the attempts by the Home Office, which has been going on for some time now, to sort of hurry up the process and to try and quote unquote ease the backlog of asylum applications, right? They've inevitably, it's caused a lot of these people who have claimed asylum in Glasgow to end up quote unquote homeless, right? That combined with the fact that Glasgow in and of itself has a homelessness crisis, there's a lack of social housing, and there is a lack of affordable housing, and there's a lack of housing to go around. Waiting lists continue to increase exponentially as the years go on, and it's not limited to just Glasgow, but the point remains the same, that because it is an issue in Glasgow, it's, dare I say, far right to point out that refugees here, quote unquote, could be exacerbating a problem that would exist even if these people were not here in the first place. So again, for all their fucking waffle and their virtuous BS about welcoming absolutely every single person that wishes to traverse the European continent, proclaiming to seek a better life, only to be picked up by our fucking coast guards halfway across the English Channel, and then traversed up to the UK, to Scotland, in a bus, only to find themselves in a hostel or a hotel temporarily, right? For all these people, for all their, oh, we welcome everybody, refugees welcome, you know, oh my God, please come to our country because we're so progressive. You are the problem. You are the problem. These people are the problem. It's no me that's the problem. It's not the people that are getting pissed off with what's going on that are the problem. It is the people who continuously, to no end, advocate for these people to come here in the first place, who are the problem. This, again, goes back to a video I made a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago now. This is gaslighted, you know? You are being made to feel like you are the problem, or you are being portrayed to be the problem, despite the fact the problem exists because the people who are advocating for them to be here in the first place create the fucking problem. You know? If there is a housing crisis, if there is a lack of affordable housing, why the hell would you continuously advocate for people to come here? Makes no sense that for anybody to have the temerity to point out that increasing the amount of asylum applicants into a region might even just ever so slightly have an impact on the waiting list for housing. For them to be called far right is remarkable. And for people to turn around and dismiss what I've just said there, you know, oh, you're just a racist. You love Hitler. Aye. Well, why is it that they themselves, the Scottish government, as well as Glasgow Council in this particular instance, why is it that they themselves concede or wished to see a sort of stalling process on the amount of people coming to Glasgow in the first place? Refugee-wise, that is. Why is that? Because they themselves have got no choice but to sort of hold their hands up to a certain extent and concede that it's playing a part. But the unfortunate truth here is, which again goes a long way to show a serious lack of sincerity, is the fact that they will never actually just come out right and say that refugees, migrants, immigrants, legal or otherwise, could play, do play, will play, should play a role, significant or insignificantly, to any sort of waiting lists or schools, dentistry, housing waiting lists and whatnot. You know, they can't do that. They will never be seen to say such a thing, because in doing so, it gives ground to their opposition, which just goes to show how fucking full of it they really are. This is really about being there for the people that they claim to represent. Then they would be open about things, but it's all about my party politics. That brings us to Falkirk. And before I get into some of the cringe in relation to Falkirk, obviously this came in relation to, and truth be told, I was not even aware of this, right? So a man who raped girl 15 on street, jail for 9 years, okay? This is in Falkirk. I've got family down in Falkirk, by the way. And even then, I still didn't know this was even going on. Didn't know it was a protest or anything going on at the weekend, etc. Didn't know that this story in particular existed. That said, it is a thing. And you know what? Actually, in and of itself, goes a long way to show just how fucking malevolent the mainstream media, whatnot, have become in recent years, because all of their coverage of my far rights in relation to Falkirk, etc., none of them whatsoever, especially in a TV context, that is BBC, STV, ITV, and whatnot, none of them have actually mentioned this particular case, despite the fact the people on the ground who were at these protests and whatnot have continuously brought up this particular case. Strange that, you know, they would have you believe everybody's a bunch of goose steppers. A man who raped a 15-year-old girl after following her on a street in Stirlingshire has been jailed for 9 years. He targeted the girl in Falkirk Town Centre in October 2023. He was an asylum seeker from Afghanistan, right? And I'm not going to go any further into the article. I mean, you get the drift. It's not exactly anything new at this point. That said, we then get to stuff like this. Outrage as Reform councillor shares stage with neo-Nazi at Falkirk protest. I always find stuff like this really, really, really questionable, in terms of the fact that it's absolutely fine and dandy for politicians, and we've seen it over the years, such as the anti-racist protests that seem to occur at this point annually in Glasgow. It's absolutely fine for Humza Yousaf, Paul Sweeney, other Labour MSPs, some from the Greens, occasionally some from the SNP. It doesn't matter who the hell they are and where the hell they come from. They can stand on stage, intermittently between other critical race theorists, if we're talking about anti-racism, or what about the climate crackpot BS? What about all the politicians that seem to prance about the place with their little rainbow flags and whatnot when it comes to LGBT marches, etc.? It's absolutely fine, provided they are sort of singing from the progressive hymn sheet. That is absolutely fine, right? Okay, where's the calls for any of these people to resign or take a back step, or to stop getting involved in, matters that don't concern them? No, that's fine. Again, I think this goes a long way to show just how much of a grip this so-called progressive oligarchy has within society, where a politician can't even attend an event, right, and without being chastised, right? I mean, even this, for example, briefly, it says here that reform has to distance itself from extremists, right? Because reform's really going to save the day. But regardless, extremists, what are we talking about here? Oh, because people have taboo opinions, this paradigm, left-right dichotomy. Keep voting, Goyam. Yeah, that sort of BS. Regardless, here we go. So, just very briefly, as we come down, it says here that protesters from the group Save Our Future and Our Kids' Future demonstrated against uncontrolled immigration, right? According to witnesses, and despite the group rejecting links to the far right, attendees included several individuals openly displaying fascist symbols. The group's names itself echoes extremist slogans used by white nationalists, most notably the so-called 14 words coined by American neo-Nazi David Lane. The primary slogan in the 14 words is, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." And then, of course, we get this screenshot, which I've seen quite often punted out by a lot of the media, BBC, etc. This one screenshot. Were there people there that were genuinely Zeke heiling? I don't know. I wasn't there. Were they doing it unironically for a laugh? I don't know. All I will say is, if you were doing it for humorous purposes, or you were doing it because you genuinely are a quote-unquote Nazi, then you're really doing a bit of a disservice to the cause at present, as far as Falkirk was and is concerned, given the fact that the people who oppose you, who are busting from all over the country every single time one of these events occur, they all think you're Nazis. They all think you're a goose stepper. They all think that if you blink too much when you're speaking, that's far-right dog whistles, etc. Why give them any ammunition? But again, herein lies a lot of problems, because at the end of the day, these people will do whatever it takes to find something to sort of validate their insane positions. Okay? But again, if you were doing it for humorous purposes, or if you were doing it because you genuinely are Austrian painter worshiper, then, do that in your own time, man. But I mean, I don't think you're doing much of a fucking service to the local people. At the start of the rally, a handful of men performed salutes, but did they? I don't know, can't say. And the only proof that you've got is a photo. Where's the videos? Surely there should be videos of this shit. As for this, can't condone that. What the fuck's that about? Don't know. Really don't know. But then it says here that the Reform UK councillor for the Upper Braes went on to share the stage with PA's member Richard McFarlane, never heard of him, who told the crowd that white people will be a minority in the UK by the 2060s. Okay. I would hardly say that's contentious at this point. She quit the Tory party last February and joined Reform in March this year. And then it goes on to say that PA has been described as a far-right, fascist, neo-Nazi, and white nationalist hate group. At the heart of its ideology is the white genocide myth. That's a myth, apparently. I would hardly call it a myth, really. I would, it's semantics, is it not? Ethnocide. I would argue that's really a thing. The speeches range from conspiratorial to openly fascist. Fuck off. let's be honest here. If there was one legitimately, air quote unquote, fascistic fucking speech, you would hear to no end all about it. But all they have is ridiculous, hyperbolic headlines and fear porn and sensationalist nonsense. Okay. And very, 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 very rarely they come across something that they can home in on, such as the forever shared goose stepping Z Kyle pose screenshot wise, right? If there was genuinely some fascistic speech that took place in Falkirk, you would have heard all about it, guaranteed. But again, it's the argumentation that's presented, over and over and over again, that people are scapegoating migrants. The far right are swooping in on people's concerns, etc. But yet they indirectly dismiss the concerns. I always find that strange. They say, "Oh, the far right they've turned up and they're mingling with the locals and they're trying to exploit their concerns, right?" But they don't actually address their concerns themselves. They just continuously bang on about the far right. Everybody's far right, apparently. Again, look at Glasgow. Housing shortages, housing crisis. They just keep importing more and more and more. John Slippery fucking Swinney, unelected, of course, sitting there talking about the need for an inclusive society. And in Falkirk, of course, people have the temerity to express concerns given the fact that our refugee, or quote unquote, has been convicted of rape. And what do the dickheads do? And they're bust up from all over the joint. Oh, we need to go and combat the Nazis. Yeah, instead of actually addressing their concerns, they just lambast everybody as being far right. I don't know. These people. Campaigners say anti-hotel protesters are extremists. It's just fucking stupid, man. Anti-racist protesters shared a counter demonstration. You never, ever, ever, ever hear far right versus far left. No, it's always the far right are met with counter demonstrations. The far right are met with counter protesters. Extremists on the right were met with simply like-minded and able-bodied individuals, etc. Who's the real extremist here? Who really wields the power in this progressive oligarchy? Irrespective, reality of the matter is this, because I do realize I have gone on for some time now. All I'm simply saying is that it is not scapegoating migration, nor is it scapegoating individuals in particular, nor just to give a bit of credit to those that are a bit cacky as far as civic nationalism is concerned. It's not even a racist issue. It's just simply there's a lot of issues that are occurring within society. And, there was that old phrase that we all grew up knowing. Something that I used to think was somewhat admirable. Charity begins at home. But all of a sudden, charity beginning at home is far right and bigoted in nature. So we should open our doors and spread our pictish butt cheeks wide open and allow that diversity to slide itself inside. Adios. Hadi fucking os.